Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into some seriously deep waters today, folks, getting philosophical.
That's right. We'll be tackling those big life questions.
They kind of keep you up at night.
Yeah.
Like, what's it all about? What's the meaning of life? And is any of this even real?
And to help us on this journey, we've got a whole bunch of thought-provoking sources, articles, descriptions of philosophy courses, even a whole podcast series devoted to these big questions.
We've basically assembled a dream team of thinkers to guide us.
And we'll be looking at both Western and Eastern philosophies, to see how these ancient ideas still matter today.
So before we get too far, let's back up a bit. What exactly is philosophy anyway?
Well, think about a kid always asking why. That's the heart of philosophy. It's all about asking those fundamental questions about the world and, our place in it.
Like a workout for your brain.
Exactly. But it's not just about pondering, unanswerable questions. We use reason and logic to explore different ideas, different perspectives.
So it's not just for, academics in their ivory towers.
Not at all. Philosophy is for everyone, because we all think about these big questions whether we realize it or not.
All right, well, I'm ready to dive in. Let's start with a real head-scratcher. Why does anything exist at all?
Yes, the ultimate mystery. We'll be looking at how some of history's greatest minds, like Leibniz and Spinoza, have tried to tackle this question.
And I see we've got some modern thinkers in the mix, too. Lawrence Krauss, Derek Parfit.
Right, and we can't forget the perspective of, physicists who are trying to unravel the secrets of the universe. It's fascinating how often philosophy and science overlap, in trying to understand existence.
Okay, next question, and this one might just blow your mind. Is the world around us even real?
Cue the Matrix music. This is where we enter the realm of metaphysics. That's the study of reality itself.
I feel like I'm about to fall down the rabbit hole here.
Don't worry, we're in good company. We'll be exploring the ideas of some heady hitters like Descartes, Locke, Berkeley, Hume, and Kant.
Oh, I remember Descartes from school. He's the one who said, "I think, therefore I am."
Exactly. Descartes was obsessed with certainty. How could he be absolutely sure anything was real? He even questioned, whether his senses were deceiving him.
One of our sources, it's a course called The Big Questions of Philosophy, really gets into Descartes' struggle with this.
He ultimately concluded that the only thing he could be certain of was his own existence as a, thinking being.
Okay, my brain's already starting to hurt. But let's keep going. What about consciousness? What does it even mean to be conscious?
The mystery of consciousness. This one has stumped philosophers and scientists for ages.
How do you explain that inner world, thoughts, feelings, experiences?
Exactly. We'll be looking at the ideas of some contemporary philosophers like Thomas Nagel and David Chalmers, who are grappling with this very question.
I think Nagel wrote that famous essay, What Is It Like to Be a Bat?
That's a classic. In that essay, Nagel argues that we can never truly understand what it's like to experience the world from another creature's point of view.
So even imagining what it's like to be a bat, flying around in the dark, is impossible.
Well, we can try, but we'll never truly know what it's like to experience the world through a bat's senses. It shows how subjective consciousness really is.
Okay, before we get too lost in these mind-bending concepts, let's step back for a minute and explore some of the foundational figures of Western philosophy. The ancient Greek all-stars, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle.
These guys laid the groundwork for so much of Western thought.
It's incredible that ideas from thousands of years ago are still relevant today.
Absolutely. Their insights into human nature, ethics, politics, the nature of reality, they still shape our understanding of the world.
So let's start with Socrates. What's interesting is that he never wrote anything down.
True. He really believed in the power of dialogue and debate, as a way to uncover truth. He's famous for the Socratic method, asking questions to challenge assumptions and make you think critically.
I feel like every good teacher I've ever had has used the Socratic method in some way.
It's a timeless technique, but his student, Plato, did a lot of writing, and we got some incredible insights from him.
Yeah, Plato's theory of forms. The idea that our world is just a shadow of a higher reality.
Mind-bending stuff. Imagine a beautiful flower. What makes it beautiful? Plato would say it's participating in the form of beauty, which exists beyond our senses.
So the beauty we see is just a reflection of a perfect, eternal form of beauty.
Exactly. And this applies to all sorts of concepts. Justice, truth, goodness. For Plato, these forms were the ultimate reality.
Whoa, pretty deep. And the Republic, his work about what makes a just society, that's still relevant today.
Definitely. Plato grappled with ideal governments, the role of the state, the nature of justice. These are issues we're still debating centuries later.
Okay, last but not least in our Greek trio, we have Aristotle. This guy was a true polymath.
He made contributions to so many fields: logic, metaphysics, biology, politics, ethics. You name it, he probably studied it.
I remember learning about Aristotle's golden mean, the idea that virtue lies in finding balance.
Right, he believed we should strive for moderation in all things. For example, courage is the mean between cowardice and recklessness.
Makes sense. Too much or too little of anything can be bad.
Exactly. Aristotle was all about finding that sweet spot, the balance that leads to a virtuous and fulfilling life.
He also emphasized living in accordance with reason.
Key idea in his philosophy. We should use reason to understand the world and to make good choices.
So for Aristotle, a good life wasn't just about rules or blind obedience. It was about using your mind to figure things out.
Yeah.
And to live in a way that's both rational and virtuous.
I think that's a great way to put it.
This is fascinating stuff. But I think we need a change of scenery. Let's head east and see what Eastern philosophy has to offer.
I'm happy to guide you. We'll be exploring traditions like Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, and Hindu philosophy, all offering unique perspectives on life's big questions.
I'm ready for a new adventure.
Let's dive in then. We'll see how these traditions often emphasize ethics, family relationships, and harmony in society.
A different way of thinking about how we live and interact with the world.
Exactly. And we'll encounter some fascinating concepts along the way, like dharma, moral duty, and karma, the idea of cause and effect. They're central to these philosophies.
We have a program here called Life, Caring for Our Educators and Principals, that actually highlights how these Eastern philosophies can help us find meaning and purpose.
It's amazing how these ancient traditions are still being used to guide people in all sorts of professions and walks of life.
Timeless wisdom for navigating modern life.
Exactly. They remind us that this search for meaning, for purpose, it's a universal quest, and there are many paths you can take.
Okay, before we move on, let's clarify something for our listeners. I know this talk about different philosophical schools can sound a bit intimidating.
Right, like you have to pick one and stick with it forever.
Exactly. The beauty of philosophy is that it encourages exploration. You can dive into different ideas, try them on, see what resonates with you.
It's like having a toolbox full of different mental tools. Use the right one for the job. Sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes a screwdriver.
And sometimes you need a really big wrench to loosen up those stubborn philosophical nuts.
Great analogy. What matters is having a variety of tools and knowing how to use them.
All right, now that we've covered some basics of Western and Eastern philosophy, let's dive deeper into specific branches. Up next, metaphysics, the study of reality itself.
Get ready, this is where things get really mind-bending. We'll be grappling with questions like, what is existence? Do we have free will? And what is the nature of time and space?
Now things are getting interesting.
Like, are we living in the Matrix? Is everything we see and experience just an illusion?
I'm getting dizzy just thinking about it. But hey, we've got some expert guys to help us through this, right?
Absolutely. One of our sources, a podcast called The Philosophy Journey, really delves into these metaphysical questions. They even have a whole episode on, the nature of time and space.
Time travel, alternate dimensions. Are we all just characters in some giant video game? My head's spinning.
But here's the thing. These aren't just, abstract thought experiments. The questions metaphysics grapples with have real implications for how we understand the world and our place in it.
So, if we don't have free will, does that mean we're not responsible for our actions?
Now, that's a big one. Philosophers have been debating that for centuries. There are no easy answers, but by, wrestling with these concepts, we can at least gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and the choices we make.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and explore another branch of philosophy, epistemology.
It's all about knowledge. What we can know, how we know it, and how we can be sure that what we believe is actually true.
This is like detective work for the mind.
Exactly. We'll be examining different ways of knowing, like, for example, empiricism.
Empiricism, yeah, I remember that. Isn't that the idea that knowledge comes from our senses, our experiences in the world?
That's it. If you see a cat sitting on a mat, you know it's true because you saw it with your own eyes. Your senses gave you the evidence.
Oh, okay, makes sense. What other ways of knowing are there?
Well, there's rationalism, which emphasizes the role of reason and logic in acquiring knowledge.
So, if I see one cat sitting on a mat and then another cat sitting on another mat, I can use reason to conclude that cats like to sit on mats.
Exactly. You're using your powers of observation and logic to reach a conclusion.
But wait, what if there's a cat out there somewhere that doesn't like to sit on mats. Does that mean my conclusion is wrong?
Well, that's where skepticism comes in. Skepticism is all about questioning our beliefs and asking how we can be certain that we're not being misled, either by our senses or our reasoning.
So skeptics are like the ultimate doubters.
You could say that, but they're not necessarily saying that knowledge doesn't exist. They're just challenging us to think critically about how we justify our beliefs and how much certainty we can really have.
So even my belief that cats like to sit on mats can be called into question.
It's probably a pretty safe bet. But the point is, skepticism encourages us to be thoughtful and examine the evidence before jumping to conclusions.
One of our sources, in an article called The Big Questions, Exploring the Fundamentals of Philosophy, mentions how different philosophers have, different ideas about what makes something right or wrong, and how we should go about making moral decisions.
That really gets you thinking. How much of what we consider right or wrong is shaped by our culture, how we were raised, our own personal beliefs, and is there some universal moral law that goes beyond all that?
It's that age-old question. Is morality relative, or are some things just wrong no matter what?
Questions that philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries, and they're still relevant today.
Speaking of right and wrong, I think it's time we venture into the land of ethics.
Yes, ethics. The branch of philosophy that deals with those moral principles. What's good, what's bad, how we should treat each other, and what it means to live a moral life.
I remember learning about different ethical frameworks, like utilitarianism, deontology, and virtue ethics.
Those are some of the big ones. Utilitarianism is all about maximizing happiness and minimizing suffering for the greatest number of people.
So if you had to choose between saving one person's life or 10 people's lives, a utilitarian would say you should save the 10.
Right, because that would result in the greatest overall happiness.
Okay, what about deontology? That one always seemed, I don't know, stricter to me.
Well, deontology is all about following the rules, following your moral duty, regardless of the consequences.
So even if you could save, say, 10 lives by telling a lie, a deontologist would say, nope, lying is wrong no matter what.
Exactly. Deontologists believe that some actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of the outcome.
That seems pretty tough. What if you had to lie to protect someone's life? Or tell the truth and put them in danger?
Those are the kinds of dilemmas deontology grapples with. No easy answers in ethics.
Okay, what about virtue ethics? That one always sounded a bit more, appealing to me.
Virtue ethics focuses on developing good character traits, virtues, instead of just blindly following rules or calculating outcomes.
So it's not just about doing the right thing, it's about being a good person.
You got it. Virtues like honesty, courage, compassion, justice, they're seen as essential for living a good and fulfilling life.
One of our sources, a book called Philosophy and Life, Exploring the Great Questions of How to Live, really dives into this idea of using philosophy as a guide.
The author, A.C. Grayling, argues that philosophy can give us a framework for making good choices and living a meaningful life.
So it's not just about abstract ideas, it's about using these philosophical insights to navigate those real-life challenges.
Exactly. Philosophy can help us understand ourselves better, make sense of the world around us, and live in a way that is both ethical and, fulfilling.
I'm starting to see how all these different parts of philosophy fit together. Metaphysics, epistemology, ethics. But how do they all relate to this idea of living a good life?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we'll explore more deeply in our next segment.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey exploring, the world of philosophy.
We've tackled some pretty big questions. The nature of reality, the meaning of knowledge, the foundations of morality.
And now, in this last part, we're going to bring it all together and see how it connects to that age-old search for the good life.
Ah, yes, the good life. It's a concept that's, fascinated philosophers for centuries. And it's something we all think about in our own way.
Everyone wants to know the secret to living well, right? Finding happiness, meaning, fulfillment.
And luckily, we have some great sources here with insights from, both Western and Eastern philosophical traditions.
One of our sources, the course, The Big Questions of Philosophy, actually asks that question directly. What is the meaning of life?
A question with no easy answers, but it's definitely worth thinking about. We touched on Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia, the idea of flourishing, living well.
It's not just about, fleeting moments of happiness, but kind of overall well-being and fulfillment that comes from living in accordance with reason and virtue.
Exactly. And this flourishing involves developing our potential as human beings. cultivating those things that make us unique, our capacity for reason, compassion, creativity.
We also have some sources from Eastern philosophies that offer a different perspective on this good life idea.
That's right, the program Life. Caring for Our Educators and Principles explores how philosophies like Confucianism and Buddhism offer paths to meaning and purpose.
So Confucianism emphasizes, like living a virtuous life, serving others, and contributing to society.
It reminds us that we're not just isolated individuals, we're part of a bigger community. And our actions, they have an impact on others.
And Buddhism, with its focus on mindfulness and compassion, encourages us to find inner peace and live in the present moment.
Reminding us that true happiness often comes from within, from being content, being grateful for the simple things.
It's really interesting how these different traditions offer such a diverse range of views on what makes a good life.
And that's part of what's so great about philosophy. It encourages us to explore different ideas and find what speaks to us, personally.
It's almost like there isn't one good life. There are many paths to fulfillment, to happiness.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The key is finding what aligns with our values, with what we want to achieve, and creating a life that feels, meaningful and true to ourselves.
Another source, the online course, Life's Big Questions, your concise guide to philosophy's most important wisdom, actually goes into all these different views. It helps people understand how philosophers have answered these big questions throughout history.
It's a great resource for anyone who wants to dive deeper. And it reminds us that the search for the good life is an ongoing journey. It involves reflection, growth, and, self-discovery.
So we've talked about what philosophy is, we've looked at some really big questions, and we even touched on this idea of the good life. But before we wrap up, I think there's one more question we should address.
Yeah, I agree. And that is, why does any of this matter?
Right. How does all this deep thinking, these, abstract concepts, how does it affect our daily lives?
A lot of people ask that. And it's a valid question. Philosophy can seem, theoretical, a bit removed from everyday life.
But I think we've seen in this deep dive that philosophy is anything but irrelevant.
Exactly. It may not give us all the answers, but it gives us something much more valuable, a way of thinking.
One of our sources, an article called Why You Need to Keep Asking Life's Biggest Questions, stresses how important it is to ask those deep questions, especially in today's world where it's so easy to get caught up in the everyday hustle and forget what really matters.
It's a reminder to slow down, take a step back and really grapple with those big, challenging questions, the ones that help us make sense of our lives and, the world.
Now, wrestling with these philosophical ideas, we challenge our own assumptions, see things from different perspectives, and develop a deeper understanding of, ourselves and what it means to be human.
It's like philosophy gives us a new pair of glasses, right? A new way of seeing the world. And these glasses help us see things more clearly, to appreciate the nuances, the complexity, and to navigate life's challenges with a bit more wisdom and compassion.
And we can't forget those practical benefits. Philosophy helps us think critically, reason more effectively, and communicate better.
Those are valuable skills in any field, whether you're a scientist, an artist, an entrepreneur, a teacher, a parent, you name it.
So even if we never find those definitive answers to the big questions, the process of asking them, of engaging in this philosophical inquiry, can be incredibly enriching.
It's a journey that can change us intellectually, emotionally, even spiritually. It can help us become more thoughtful, more compassionate, and more engaged in the world.
And I think that's what this whole deep dive has been about, showing that philosophy, far from being some abstract and irrelevant thing, can actually help us live richer, more meaningful lives.
It's about the power of ideas, ideas that shape how we see ourselves and the world, cultivating curiosity, a sense of wonder, and a lifelong love of learning.
So as we wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive, we encourage you to keep those philosophical gears turning.
Keep asking those big questions, challenge your assumptions, have those thoughtful conversations, and above all, never stop exploring the mysteries of life.
Who knows what amazing insights you might find. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of philosophy.
And until next time, keep wondering.